Hey everybody, welcome to CrazyTechLab, and I've got a pretty interesting video for all you small form factor fans today, because the ASUS ROG STRIX MINI-ITX motherboard has landed way ahead of its usual schedule, which is usually a couple of months after the initial launch of a new chipset. But here today, as you can see, I've got the ROG STRIX Z690-I gaming Wi-Fi, so a bit of a mouthful there, but a lot to get through with this motherboard today. There's a whole bunch of features on this board, a lot of it is new. There are new bolt-on things and all sorts of other stuff going on in the PCBs. Lots of super interesting stuff to talk about. Basically, working out whether this should be your Mini-ITX motherboard of choice if you're building a small form factor 12th gen Alder Lake system using one of Intel's fantastic new CPUs. So you can also check out my roundup of the Intel CPUs, my full review, both here on YouTube and over on Forbes. And I will also be doing a review of this motherboard over on Forbes as well, which you can check out, probably with lots of photos and all that kind of stuff if you prefer that kind of thing. So in this video today though, we're going to be checking things out such as the M.2 temperatures, the VRM temperatures, the actual performance of the board and a few benchmarks. And I should also add that this board here is the one that I used to test my Alder Lake CPUs, because I had to do some pretty early testing early on before I had any other boards available. And this board here is pretty much handled everything without a hitch and was reasonably power efficient. It overclocked the CPUs as well. So from my own personal experience, I've been pretty impressed with it, and super stable as well. For a new chipset, a new socket and a new architecture on a CPU, things have been remarkably stable. So whether that's just an ASUS thing or whether that's like the whole package with Z690, hopefully it is. Hopefully there aren't any major glaring issues out there at the moment. But today, yeah, we're going to be checking out this board in some detail and seeing whether or not it is worth your cash. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and also don't forget to check out my other videos, because lots more Mini-ITX stuff I've covered here already, and lots more Mini-ITX stuff that I will be doing in future, as well as a whole bunch of other things as well, such as cases, water cooling and PC modding. So also don't forget to like this video if you found it informative, and do send me a comment below. Let me know what you think of this board, and also what you think of maybe of this video or this channel. Is there other stuff that you want me to take a look at? Always interested in hearing what you guys will have to say. So without further ado, let's check out the features on the motherboard. Okay, so first up, I guess we should talk about the most standout feature of this board, and something that we haven't really seen before, which is this daughter board down here. So it is kind of interesting because there's a whole load of stuff on it, and it's in kind of a weird place as well. So what I would do is just whip it off, and then we can have a look at it. As you can see, it just kind of just pulls off like that, and you've got two Type-C looking ports down there, and one either side, and they just hook up to those two things here. So when I just saw these two ports on the board, I was like, what in God's name are they for? Have I been, have I missed out on some USB standard here? Like, they just look really odd sticking up, but this is what it's for. So I'm guessing it's just to save a bit of real estate on the PCB and to make room for extra space. And the first thing you will need to know is if you're not keen on using this, you're going to lose quite a few features, because the only SATA ports on the Z690i gaming Wi-Fi are located on this daughter board. So you've got two on the top and you've got two down here. So these are obviously reasonably well placed, so you can just run your cables off straight through the cable routing holes in your case. The top two ports, not so much. As you can see, that they're angled and mounted so that you'd have to run, even an angled cable would have to run this way, unless there were backwards angled SATA cables. I don't honestly know, if I'm honest. But it would have just been nice to have them mounted so at least they kind of point towards your cable routing holes. I know not all Mini-ITX cases are the same. and they do vary quite a bit in design, but that's it's just never going to look good. I mean, the cables are either going to be pointing up or they're going to be angled and traipsing over the motherboard. So yeah, it's just one of the downsides to this thing, and I could be, you know, completely sympathise with anyone that doesn't really want to use it. The other connectors that we've got here is a 4-pin RGB and a 3-pin RGB, so a couple more RGB connectors. And the really interesting thing is this here is the front panel header. So this is for your case, hard drive and power lights, as well as the power and reset buttons. So thankfully, this whole thing is actually optional. If you want to, you can chuck it away, because there is another way to turn on your PC, which is a 2-pin header down here. So it actually has two ways, or two 2-pin headers, one on the daughter board as part of the main front panel header. But if you don't want to use this for whatever reason, perhaps you've just got M.2 SSDs and you just want to clear some space, it does look a bit cleaner without that daughter board, I have to say. There is another way of powering on your PC, which is pretty good. So unfortunately, that does mean that this is basically the only 2-pin header on the board, and that does mean that it is missing something, which I quite like about ASUS boards, other than this one, which is a thermal probe header. So I use the thermal probe header to basically control my radiator fans on my water-cooled PC, because it's much more efficient controlling your radiator fans using coolant temperature, using a coolant probe, which would attach to one of those things, than controlling your radiator fans using CPU temperature, because doing the latter is a really dumb way of controlling your water cooling loop, because you basically just see the fans spinning up and spinning down all the time, and you don't get any extra cooling, because the coolant will actually absorb a heck of a lot of heat before it actually warms up and your radiator fans will have any impact. So you can afford to have your radiator fans kind of skimming along the bottom range of their RPMs, with short loads of your CPU, short high loads, you generally don't need to spin the fans up like you would a heatsink or something like that. So this board sadly does away with the thermal probe header, and I use that on the B550 version of this board, which I've got in my main rig at the moment. So yeah, just a bit of a shame from that point of view. What we've got here is the usual triple stack of heatsinks and PCBs for this M.2 arrangement here. So you've got one big heatsink on the top, which cools the M.2 SSD below. Then underneath that SSD is another thermal pad. So both sides of the heatsink, of the SSD, should I say, are actually cooled. And the same goes for another M.2 port, which is further down the stack. As you can see down there, there's a heatsink on top and also a thermal pad below. So it's a pretty good arrangement. I will just grab my screwdriver and quickly whip it off so you can see what we are actually dealing with. And it's a much easier arrangement than previous ASUS motherboards I've seen. It's just so much easier getting this thing off. The Z590 version was just really fiddly and took ages. But here, as you can see, you've got the M.2 port on top. As you can see, I've just pulled off the protective layer because I've already been using this board and testing it. And then you've got the thermal pad layer underneath as well. So that will cool both sides of the SSD. And then to put your SSD in, you've actually got this latch here. So there are no screws involved. All you need to do is put your SSD in, pull the latch over, and then it's secure. And I really like that. No one else has actually got that at the moment. Unless someone's introduced it on their Z690 boards. I won't know because I haven't actually looked at any other manufacturer's boards yet. But yeah, this board I do really like, and I just like that feature as well. So it's kind of shaping up to be pretty good. And then if we just whip this one off quickly, I haven't actually taken this one apart yet, but might as well do it on camera just so you can see live what you'll be doing for the first time. And that screw was really stiff there. Let's put a bit of welly in it, but is this gonna play ball on camera? No, it won't, because I've actually missed a screw. So are we nearly there? Yeah, I think it's coming. So yeah, we've got this connector at the end here. I think that actually needs to come off as well. I'm just trying to see how to do that. So yeah, so we've got a big connector at the end, which connects the top PCB to the motherboard, and then this one should hopefully just pull off like that. So I'm going to grab that screw. So yeah, that's kind of the top heatsink for the lower port. So it's all pretty easy. There's lots of screws to deal with. It's not the easiest way to install your M.2 SSDs. I might have preferred to have one on the back panel just so it's a bit easier. But I'm sure ASUS has its reasons for doing that. So yeah, I'll search for that screw later. I think it kind of fell off over there. So yeah, just bear in mind that you've got to remove that connector first, and then you've got various layers of PCB to deal with. So you can kind of see where some of the engineering or some of the price tag has gone because we are dealing with a pretty complicated arrangement here. I mean, just look at that stack of PCBs there. It's pretty impressive. Over-engineered? I don't know. At least it means that you get both sides of the M.2 SSDs cooled. It means you get extra rows of stuff here, and the daughter board means that you get the full range of SATA ports as well. So maybe it's from a cooling point of view. Maybe ASUS couldn't find any way to have the power circuitry that it's got here. I believe it's a 10.1 or 10+1, should I say, power phase array. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? But it's remarkably complicated, which is undoubtedly adding to the price, but it's just something that we will have to live with this motherboard because it ain't getting any cheaper anytime soon. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys what is under the I/O shroud here, and we've got this perforated piece of metal. You can see it's actually got an air vent there at the top to protect from dust, and for good reason, because there is a chipset fan, or chipset fan, VRM fan, whatever you want to call it, kind of cools pretty much everything here. But the two large banks of heat sinks are connected via a heat pipe, so this fan does actually cool pretty much everything that you see here. And the fan thankfully didn't get very noisy during testing. In fact, I didn't hear it at all. So I'm guessing it's set to kind of switch on at very, very high temperatures. It's usually around 65 degrees or thereabouts. In the EFI, you can stop it spinning as well in the EFI, like you could with the Z5 and M.2 version of this board. And also there is the option to obviously have it spin up earlier if you're going to be doing overclocking and that kind of thing, or just limit its speed, just have it running very, very slowly, inaudibly all the time as well. So VRM temperatures, we were looking at a maximum of around 55 degrees C with the CPU at stock speed, and which is where I was carrying out most of my testing. So obviously if you're overclocking, it's purely going to depend on where you actually want to get to. If you're extreme and you're pushing the voltages, obviously the VRMs will be getting hotter and the fan might engage. But for my stock speed results, and indeed when overclocking to modest levels, I didn't hear the fan come on at all. So it doesn't seem to be too conspicuous, thankfully. So as you can see around the back here, there are vents as well for the air to go in, or for the air to go out rather, being drawn in from the top. And temperatures for the VRMs, the 10+1 power phase design being kept in check as well. And speaking of temperatures, the M.2 array down here kept the SSD below 60 degrees as well. So this does a pretty good job of cooling PCI Express 4.0 SSDs too. The rear I/O panel is reasonably well populated with a total of 7 Type A USB ports, with 5 of those being USB 3.0 or faster. There's an HDMI output as well, which is useful for using your CPU's onboard video, either to diagnose a potentially faulty graphics card or doing away with that graphics card entirely and using the slot for something else. Of course, you can also output video over one of the Thunderbolt 4 compatible Type-C USB ports. There are 2 of those here, but of course Thunderbolt 4 is useful for a whole range of other things, potentially opting for faster Ethernet speeds, such as using a 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter if the 2.5G Ethernet port included on the board isn't fast enough for you. There are also USB BIOS, flashback and CMOS clear buttons, 802.11ax Wi-Fi, and in addition to the usual 3 audio mini jacks here. You also get an optical output port as well. So what do we make of the ASUS ROG STRIX Z690-I gaming Wi-Fi? I think I actually got that right, didn't I? Yeah, amazing. So anyway, but it is a very, very expensive motherboard, to be sure. I mean, nearly £400 here in the UK, about £375, I think, and well over $400 in the States. It is not a cheap way to get into MINI-ITX and Alder Lake with Intel's 12th generation CPUs, but I don't think there is going to be a particularly cheap way. Perhaps if we ditch the DDR5 memory for DDR4 somewhere, or we opt for one of the cheaper chipsets, that might be a way to get into it. At the end of the day, the 12th gen CPUs are ridiculously fast, even at stock speed. So for me, I think if I was going out and buying a MINI-ITX system, I would almost certainly be ditching the Z series motherboards and hoping that something cheaper comes along soon. And as we've seen with a lot of the motherboards, especially with the ROG Strix versions, the cheaper chipset versions don't usually lack that many features compared to the premium models. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. As far as the motherboard goes, it is pretty cramped on here. Admittedly, it was pretty difficult dealing with my water-cooled test system, actually getting in and dealing with some of the mounting screws around the CPU socket. That was pretty hard. I've also had compatibility issues with this board's predecessor because of those reasons. Some water blocks didn't actually fit. The daughter board, I know that there have been a few comments in the previous video where I did the preview of people that really don't like it. I can fully appreciate that, but if you want to get rid of it, you will be losing the SATA ports. And I think it was an RGB port as well. But thankfully, ASUS does still allow you to turn your PC on and off, because don't forget the front panel connector is on this board as well. But there is a separate 2-pin power button on the PCB. So if you want to ditch this daughter board and just have that power on button, you can do that. So that's kind of a neat bit of thinking from ASUS here. You don't get any more fan headers or any kind of other crazy features here though. It's not a ROG Impact board, you know, where you get extra daughter boards for fan headers and all that kind of stuff. But it's as close to one as you will get, I think. You know, the next step up from here would almost certainly be some sort of Impact MINI-ITX motherboard with a few more fan headers and that kind of thing. But that's not quite what you're getting here. The only omission, I think, compared to other ROG Strix MINI-ITX motherboards is the lack of a thermal probe header. So for me, I've got the B550 version of this board in my main rig at the moment, and I use, as I mentioned earlier in this video, and that I do use. I do use that to control my radiator fans in my water-cooled PC based on the coolant temperature, because that's the way you should be doing it. You shouldn't be basing your radiator fans on your CPU temperature. You should be basing it on coolant temperature. Without a thermal probe input to tap into your coolant with a coolant probe, you can't do that. You have to invest in extra gear, and that's going to increase the price even more, which is a bit of a shame, because I haven't actually looked at the specifications of the other MINI-ITX motherboards yet, but Gigabyte may have included one, someone else may have included one. The only alternative is to go for a full-size ATX board, but we're talking MINI-ITX and small form factor here. That's not why we're here. We're talking about going small and mighty. So everything else with this board, though, I absolutely love. So it overclocked my 12900K like an absolute trooper. There's plenty of other features on this board. I like the triple stack of heatsinks and M.2 ports here, which is generally easier to use than the Z590 version of this board. And the daughter board as well, I do kind of like it. I like stuff that goes vertical on MINI-ITX because it just shows the manufacturer understands what we want in terms of our features. And if that's given us extra space on the PCB, then so be it. Daughter boards, obviously nothing new. ASUS has done it before with the VRMs. ASRock has done it with its high-end desktop motherboards. So, you know, there's only so much real estate that you can deal with here, and I think ASUS has used it pretty well. And the inclusion of the optional daughter board, should I say, it is optional. You don't have to use it. I think that's a really cool feature. The only issue here is the price, and that's probably bumped up as well because of the Thunderbolt 4 support that you get too. There is no getting around it. It is an extremely expensive motherboard. I'm hoping that there may be cheaper options, as I say, with cheaper chipsets, and some of the competition may be a bit cheaper as well. If I was building a PC for the next 3 or 4 years, which 12th gen CPUs do offer that kind of headroom, I would seriously consider this board though. I really, really like the design. It overclocks like an absolute trooper, keeps everything cool. It's got everything you kind of need, apart from thermal probe inputs, of course. But I can fully understand if people out there are scoffing just based on the price tag. So hopefully we'll have some other options. Do follow me here on YouTube and elsewhere, and subscribe to this channel, because I'll hopefully be looking at some of those options in the near future, as well as all other things Alder Lake, as well as some other motherboards and that kind of thing. So that's it from me. Let me know what you think of this motherboard in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video as well if you found it informative, and I'll be back soon.